stock markets are trading higher at the moment, with the UK's FTSE 100 index up around about 56 points, while the Euro Stoxx 50 index is higher by 17 points. In the currency space, the euro is a little lower against the dollar. It's very subdued out there in the FX markets, however. And in the peripheral bond market space, Italian, Spanish and Portuguese bond yields are inching lower, particularly Portugal, which is down nearly over 1% after rising to 8% yesterday. It's now around about 7% down, just around about 30 basis points. Italian and Spanish bond yields are only a touch lower. We do have a Spanish bond auction later on in the session. And across other assets, oil prices remain elevated, with NYMEX up above $100, while metal prices are softer on the whole. Core government bonds such as UK gilts and German bonds are also on the back foot. Good morning, I'm Ishaq, Siddiqi, and welcome to your daily market bite. I want to give you a quick wrap up of what's going on in financial markets today. So let's start off with what happened in the previous session. It was a half-day session in the US, gearing up for today's Independence Day holiday. So US markets are closed on Thursday. And in the previous session, we had a strong ADP jobs report and a decent jobless claims report. We saw another fall in weekly claims. ADP came in at about 188,000, smashing expectations for about 160,000 jobs created by the US economy last month. A very strong number, bodes extremely well for Friday's non-farm payrolls event, which is what the market is gearing up for now. US stocks eked out meager gains. They were held back from the political instability in Portugal, which hit European markets quite hard yesterday. And at the same time, we have had geopolitical instability and tensions in Egypt, which I'll talk about in a bit. Now, the US markets didn't really kind of provide Asia a lead. Asian stocks kind of marching down a little beat. For Asian stock indices, the main focus was, of course, the payrolls event on Friday, and the good jobs data from the US gave investors some hope that we're going to get a decent number on that side. At the same time, Chinese interbank lending rates have eased off since the elevated levels that they reached last month on fears of a cash crunch in the Chinese liquidity market. Now, that's mostly owing to efforts by the Chinese central bank, which has tamed the crisis somewhat. So on the whole, even though we've had a batch of poor economic data out of China since the start of the month, investors today were a little bit more pleased about the fact that the Chinese interbank lending rates have shown some good progress and have climbed off those dangerous high levels, which caused a lot of alarm bells across global markets. Now, coming into the European session this morning, it's been we're having a broadly positive start, with the big focus now on the European Central Bank meeting and the Bank of England meeting. Now, when it comes to the European Central Bank, although no changes expected on policies, with rates to remain at lows, ultra low levels that they've kept they've kept since the last interest rate cut earlier this year, and at the same time, the ECB is likely to discuss its OMT program and what sort of potential it has now to be in use. Now, since the start of the week, we've had rumblings out of Portugal, with two high-profile ministers resigning, the finance minister and the foreign minister, throwing into question the health of Portugal's overall political situation and the economic outlook for the country, with investors worried now that without a stable government in place, we may see the country fall behind its loan obligations with the Troika, and at the same time, it may need financial assistance or seek a default or seek a default. So on the whole, investors have been quite worried about the Portuguese situation, as it refuels the Eurozone debt drama, and the spread of contagion really starts to worry the market. At the same time, Greece is finding it difficult to get its next aid money, and it's probably going to go right down to the wire with its international creditors in order to meet certain obligations before it gets that cash. So the Eurozone situation still remains kind of precarious on the whole, and it seems like Mario Draghi is going to have a tough task addressing a lot of questions, particularly about Portugal, and if the ECB is really willing to do whatever it takes and stand by Portugal and provide financial assistance if it is needed. Now, for the Bank of England, it's a different case. Incoming governor, Mark Carney, the Canadian, previous Canadian banker, who has joined the Bank of England this month. It's his first policy meeting. Now, we've seen a pretty strong sound out of UK economic data releases for the second quarter. So it's very likely that the BOE will not see the need for an increase in asset purchases or QE, and is likely to keep interest rates at record low levels. So it's unlikely that Mark Carney is going to be speaking today, and the real focus will be on the Bank of England meeting minutes for this meeting, which are out in 2 weeks from now. Now, touching briefly on Egypt, Mohamed Morsi, the president, or the once president, was ousted last night by the military in what some have described as a military coup, whereas many in Egypt have suggested the opposite. And it was a move by the military to remove a president who has failed to promote growth in the country and has made many missteps, and has aligned himself with the hardline Islamic group called, which he is part of, the Muslim Brotherhood, and has imposed some of his hardline views on Egypt. So there's been mass celebrations across the Egyptian cities, particularly in Cairo, at the removal of Mr. Morsi. Now, essentially, the Egyptian military has dissolved the Egyptian government, and are now looking at a roadmap to steer the country into the right direction. We're going to have an interim government in place until elections are called in Egypt, and the military will be overseeing the transition. Now, that causes a lot of worries to investors, particularly about the civil unrest in Egypt, because although on the whole it seems like the Egyptians have got what they wanted, well, a vast majority of Egyptians have got what they wanted, but with the removal of Mr. Morsi, the military doesn't really have a great reputation in handling transitions before, and the fact that we have an interim government in place with in a backdrop of a country that's extremely economically crippled and needs donations and funding. Investors are extremely worried that in the short term it's not going to be too pretty for Egypt, and it's likely that we're going to see a lot of tensions rise as an interim government will look to perhaps implement austerity measures which will anger an already angry Egyptian population. So that's all for your daily market bite. Tune in for another one tomorrow, and I'll discuss what happened with the ECB, and we'll talk about the non-farm payrolls report. Cheers for watching. Thanks.